Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andre Miles, along with Mr. Jeremy Davis. We are the founders of the Take a Stand movement, and today's talk is entitled Mr. and Mrs. American Government. Someone said to me that they didn't think that America will kill Americans, right? And at the time, we were talking about 9/11 and how I felt that the United States brought the buildings down and killed their own to further their agenda. This someone called me anti-American. Trust me, I'm not. Okay? So I said to them, if I can prove that American killed their own at least once in the history of this country, would they change their way of thinking? And they said to me, maybe. And I replied, that's fair. So I set out on a quest to interview Mr. and Mrs. American Government. Mr. and Mrs. American Government, hello. And thank you for taking this meeting in such short notice. I have some things that have been troubling me for some time now, and trying to get a meeting with you is, well, you know, almost impossible. So again, thank you. Okay, I would like first to remove all the sweets from the room at this time because I am not going to be sugarcoating my questions that I have, okay? Okay, so why is it that so many of your people have a hard time thinking that you would never kill them on purpose? Why do they trust you like they do? What have you done to them to make them trust you so? Huh? Now, would I be lying if I said that during World War II that your commander-in-chief at the time, one President Roosevelt, around the year 1941 in the month of December on the 28th day, deceived and murdered the Filipino people and the American soldiers that were there? Is it true or false that one General Douglas MacArthur was one of America's outstanding generals in World War II? It's been quoted by one William Manchester saying, and I quote, unquestionably, he was the most gifted man at arms this nation has produced. Would I be correct in saying that in 1941, the Philippine Islands were American possession, MacArthur being in charge of America's military protection there? Would I be fair in saying that 10 hours after Pearl Harbor was attacked, Japan began warring against the Philippines? Undoubtedly because they were U.S. possession. And if you agree with me on that, then I will be 100% correct in saying that after this attack, America began one of the cruelest deceptions in World War II, deceiving the Filipinos, MacArthur, and his own American troops. It is abundantly documented that President Franklin Roosevelt led Filipinos to believe that America was quickly coming to their aid. What's more, Roosevelt continued to deceive General MacArthur, the Filipinos, and American soldiers for months while they were being slaughtered. Is it also true or false that President Roosevelt issued a message addressed and broadcast to the people of the Philippines? And I quote, news of your gallant struggle against the Japanese aggressors, it said, has elicited in profound admiration of every American. As President of the United States, I know that I speak for all our people in this solemn occasion. I give the people of the Philippines my solemn pledge that their freedom will be redeemed and their independence established and protected. The entire resources and men and materials of the United States stand behind that pledge. I give you this message from the Navy. The broadcast went on. The United States Navy is following an intensive and well-planned campaign against Japanese forces, which will result in positive assistance in the defense of the Philippine Islands, end quote. MacArthur accepted this message at face value, did he not? It said simply and plainly that the U.S. Navy was following a campaign that would result in positive assistance in the defense of the Philippine Islands. Now, I have to believe that MacArthur was misled by this message. If he was far from alone. When President Quezon read it in his headquarters in Corridor's Malinta Tunnel, where he fought against his tuberculosis, he came to the same conclusion. His elation at the news is recorded in his memoirs, The Good Fight. On recording the message, he writes, and I quote, I was instantly electrified and thrilled. The dungeon where my sick body was laying lost its depressing gloom. I asked to be taken out to the open space, for the world was too small to contain the emotions that almost burst my heart. I held a cabinet meeting and read it to them. Giving vent to my feelings, I told my colleagues that the sacrifices our country were making were not in vain. The Philippines would not only be independent and freedom were to be protected and safeguarded by the entire resources and men and materials of the United States, end quote. So, in order to assure the warring Filipino people, Quezon issued proclamation. And I quote, "The President of the United States solemnly pledged that the freedom of our country will be preserved. You are therefore fighting with America because America is fighting for our freedom. America will not abandon us. Her help will not be delayed. We must resist further advance of the enemy until assistance arrives, which will be soon," end quote. The significance of this proclamation could not possibly have been lost on Washington. Had the message intended to hedge on this vital point, had President Roosevelt meant even to suggest that help might be delayed, someone in the government should have informed MacArthur or Quezon that the message had been misinterpreted. No one did they? No one did. Is that correct? Even if this was an oversight, the administration had enough further opportunity to correct any misinterpretation. U.S. High Commissioner Sayer, in a statement broadcast from Manila by the National Broadcasting Company, had carried in the American press, made the same significant adequacy and power that the invader will be driven from the midst and he will be rendered powerless to ever threaten us again. This was the statement of the official representative of President Roosevelt in the Philippines. But no one in Washington indicated that Commissioner Sayer had been misled. If this was a misinterpretation of the president's message, it was repeated right at home in the New York Times of December 29th. The Times story ran under a banner headline that read, and I quote, "All aid promised. President pledges protection. Navy says our fleet is not destroyed and will help defense," end quote. So, am I correct up to this point, Mr. and Mrs. American government? So then you wouldn't deny that near the end of January 1942, there still was no help from America. And by that point, the hopelessly outmanned Filipinos and American soldiers stationed there were being butchered. President Manuel Quezon sent a message directly to President Roosevelt, and I quote, "This war is not of our making," end quote. He reminded Roosevelt, Japan probably would not have attacked the Philippines had it not been under Americans' sovereign protection. "No government has the right," he said, "has the right to demand loyalty from its citizens beyond its willingness or ability to render actual protection." He said, "It seems Washington does not fully realize our situation, nor the feelings which the apparent neglect of and or safety and welfare have engendered in the hearts of the people here." And he pleaded for help, and he pleaded for help, he pleaded for help. And President Roosevelt's answer to this eloquent appeal is hard to comprehend, ladies and gentlemen, let alone defend. Roosevelt said, and I quote, "Although I cannot at this time state the day that help will arrive in the Philippines, vessels have been filled with cargo of necessary supplies and have been dispatched to Manila. Our arms, together with those of our allies, have dealt heavy blows to enemy transports and naval vessels. A continuous stream of fighter and pursuant planes and traversing the Pacific. Extensive arrivals of troops are being guarded by adequate protective elements of our Navy. It will be difficult to frame a statement more at odds with the truth or on shore to boomerang." William Manchester continued by discussing Winston Churchill's memoirs. As early as Christmas of 1941, and I quote, "As early as Christmas of 1941, before he assured the Filipinos that every vessel available was bearing down on the islands, Roosevelt and Stensman had privately told the British Prime Minister that they had written off the Filipinos as a lost cause. There are times, and I quote, "There are times," Stimson said, "when men have to die." There are times, Stimson said, when men have to die. So not only did our president lie, he continued to lie as American soldiers and Filipinos suffered and died. So it went beyond a lie. It was treacherous monstrous betrayal. What makes it even more grotesque is that the soldiers made their plans contingent upon the soon coming help arriving from the U.S. That meant thousands of soldiers died needlessly because of grisly betrayal. Now, we know that other countries in the past have done wrong to their own. Only here in America, people tend to think that America would never purposely kill thousands of their own for a certain government agenda. That we would even do it and then cover it up and make it look like others did it. Now, before you sit there and say to me, we would never, I would have to stop you and say that you already did. Which lessens your credibility with a lot of us. When we look at 9/11 then and ISIS today. And with that, I digress. Thank you for your time. Continue blessings.